Welcome to the podcast Melody and Friends, where I will be taking a virtual tour around the world and interviewing all kinds of wonderful people. And today we land in Colorado with my guest and new friend, Debbie Mirza, to talk specifically about covert passive-aggressive narcissism. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad. And you're in Colorado. I know you're getting some snow today. I've got some kids out there skiing, so that's super exciting. Hopefully you're warm during our interview time together.
I am, yeah.
Well, good. Well, that word in and of itself, covert passive aggressive narcissism, that's kind of a mouthful.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of dive in before we maybe dive into the book that you wrote that's so incredible. And we'll kind of pick that apart a little bit. But I really want those people that have never heard Debbie Mirza, why don't you share just a little bit about your story with us?
Yeah. And it is really, people talk about narcissism, and it's really known more for the overt kind, and the covert kind is really a pretty new concept, even in the world of psychology, to the point where therapists so far are not taught about that type of narcissism in school. So you may even wonder if that's what you're experiencing and go to a therapist and they may not see it, which then makes you doubt yourself even more. So yeah, I knew nothing about narcissism for the majority of my life, until I was in a marriage that lasted, well, the relationship was 24 years. We were married for 22. So the majority of my adulthood, I got married pretty young. And it was a relationship that I thought I had met Prince Charming, and I felt incredibly lucky. And there were issues throughout the relationship that I attributed to some other reason, than actually was the real reason. It wasn't until things went, like putting it in a nutshell, putting a long story in a nutshell, the last few years were really strange, and they just got more and more strange. So I did something I never thought I'd do in my life, but I was pushed so much for years that I ended up filing for divorce, which was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to do. That's not something I ever saw in my future. I thought this was for the rest of my life, marriage. And it was during the divorce process, I was explaining my story to the attorney that I was thinking of hiring. And she said, "Is your husband a narcissist?" And I have to say, I haven't told this story out loud, maybe ever, or maybe one other podcast. And it's been a thing for me, how much do I want to share? But things have happened recently that have given me more courage and clarity to go, I think I'm ready to tell more of my story. So just a side note. So it's
maybe I can help create space for that for you today. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Cause it's definitely a nervous thing. I think because, well, also we can talk about later, when you're dealing with a covert narcissist, if you at all, expose their mask, they are very vengeful people and, have a habit of punishing people who do that. It's called a narcissistic injury. So I have this swirling in my head, but I also know I'm protected. And and I feel like the more I tell my story, the more helpful it will be for other people. So having said that, I'll continue. It was, so she said, "Is your husband a narcissist?" And I was like, no, that's the last word I would use to describe this person. He's really nice. Everybody loves him. You would love him. And she's like, "Yeah, that's what they're like." And I was like, "What?" And I said, "Why are you asking me this?" And she said, I'm hearing so many classic traits in your story. It's like, really? And so she she was a very kind of intimidating woman, which was good to have for a divorce attorney, but I felt afraid of her. And, but she ended up being great. And she just looked at me like piercing eyes, and she could tell I was completely lost with what she was saying. And she said, I suggest as soon as you get home, you get a hold of as much information on this subject as you can, because you need to know what you're dealing with.
Mm.
And I was like thrown. And so on the way home, I stopped at a bookstore, and back when we went to bookstores, and I just got a stack of books on narcissism, and I just parked myself in a chair and I read and read and read. And it was confusing because some of what I read, it was like, okay, yeah, I can see that. I can see that. But no, I don't see that, because every book I had, unbeknownst to me, was all about the overt type, which is
Right.
flashy and obvious, and they're selfish and they're all about themselves. And the traits are all the same with a covert, but they look very different. So it was the beginning of my research, and there was enough there to keep me going. So then I'd go home and I'd look on YouTube and, search different articles online. And I was like, okay, I think I'm on the right track, but I'm still confused because I'm not hearing anything that's exactly my story. I started going to therapists. I actually found a book on narcissism, and the therapist who wrote it lived in Denver. So I'm so excited. So I made an appointment with her. I also have a background in life coaching. So I was a part of a community. I reached out to them. And so it was years of trying to piece together what I was dealing with and what I was going through, what I had been going through, but didn't realize. And it wasn't until I was speaking to a coach who deals with narcissism, and I explained my whole marriage to her in like 45 minutes. And at the end, try to squeeze it all in. And at the end of it, she said, it sounds like you are with a covert passive aggressive narcissist, and those are the most difficult to diagnose and to recognize.
Yes.
And as soon as she said that, like every hair on my body like stood on end. I call it the chills of truth, because your body knows when it's hearing truth.
That's right.
Yeah. And I was like, what is that? And so then I had the words that I needed to then search. And even then, there wasn't at the time a lot of information. I'd hear some. And even some, you have to be careful with YouTube videos, because there is some truth when people are talking about narcissism. It's not always true what they're saying. And sometimes it is. So you have to be so cognizant and aware of that. So anyway, it was a long journey. And then and at the time, nowhere in my mind, nowhere did I ever think I would one day write a book about it. To me, it was just my search to figure out what was going on and to heal, and to try and make sense of the most confusing thing I've ever experienced in my life. Yeah. So then it was a few years of that. And if you divorce or leave a covert narcissist, they don't leave you alone. You're their target of rage, And so that was happening a lot, like years after the divorce. And it was this one, and I actually mentioned the story in my recent book, which I know we'll talk about, but you'll hear it now. I had something so anyone who has experienced this knows this feeling of trauma entering the body. But I would get occasionally abusive emails from him, like years after. And I was still learning boundaries. And I got this email, and I was stronger. This was 3 years after the divorce. And I wrote him back, and I said, if you send any more abusive emails like this, I'm going to have to block you. An hour later, he wrote back, I received a 3-page, like single space, just fire hose of abuse, emotional abuse. And it was horrific. And as I'm reading it, I'm just feeling the trauma physically course through my body. And I had felt that a lot before. But at this point, it just pushed me. I think, I don't know, it did something to me I'd never felt before. And I just went numb. for like 3 days, and I didn't speak to anyone. I sat in my living room and just stared out the window for 3 days. And every time every time I'd wake up in the morning, I'd feel the same thing, but then I'd roll over and just start sobbing.
Mm.
And I did that until the third day. It's like biblical. On the third day, something very different happened. And I woke up, rolled over, started sobbing. And then it was just, I laid there and I just started thinking of all the other people that were going through this. I knew I wasn't alone, and I started getting angry, and I felt this like strength rising in me. It's like, enough. And I closed my eyes, and literally like a vision, I saw a cover of a book that had big, bold capital letters that said the Covert Passive Aggressive Narcissist. And it felt like an invitation, like, will you write it? And I know myself. And if I put my heart into something, I'm all in, so I knew what it would take if I took this on, but I just felt this kind of warrior feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'll do it. It's time and I'm ready. And that was the beginning of me writing that book. So I cleared my whole year, and I just dedicated that year to writing that book because I wanted to make sure it was really helpful, really accurate, really clear. And so, yeah, I ended up interviewing over 100 people, and of all types of relationships, and both men and women. And it was so enlightening. It was really like sitting across from a mirror so many times, the same stories. So it was a powerful process to do. Yeah. So that's,
Wow.
yeah, this much of my story.
Oh, no, I mean, it's so beautiful. And I loved how I loved reading in your book how many people with any type of data, any kind of, especially clinical type of data, they interview hundreds and hundreds, lots of people. And I love how you did that. I mean, like, you used human beings as an opportunity to hear their stories so that you could get the data to really back this book, because, the truth is the truth is the truth. And, that as we dive in and talk a little bit more about this, when I think of an overt narcissist, I think of the podcast that was out this summer that everybody was eating up, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, Mark Driscoll, this more overt kind of bull in a china cabinet, charisma, everybody's, and yet the covert is so subtle. And it's almost like, Debbie, I think of like Stockholm syndrome, people that have been like kidnapped for years, and eventually they can go out in public with their captor without any kind of rope or, and they just stay right with their captor because it gets really deep into their psyche.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more about just that covert narcissist, the subtle, confusing, manipulative tactics that go on that many times may even be behind closed doors, yet this public persona of charisma and lots of words. All of them have lots of words. And talk a little bit about that, what that looks like, what maybe your experience, and maybe even some of the stories that you experienced as you interviewed women.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the tricky things is covert narcissists are usually really well liked, well respected, pillars of their community, moms, on I can't think what it's called on the PTA, it's been a while. Dads coaching soccer, humanitarians, therapists, coaches, pastors, people in charge of the music at church. I mean, it's spiritual gurus, like it's all the people that come across so well. These are the politicians that everybody loves, that when you say, this is always like a red flag to me, when people talk about celebrities or politicians, and they're like, whenever you're in their presence, you just feel like you're the only one in the room, and they just look right in your eyes and you have their full attention. And I'm just like, red flag. I mean, That's a good trait if they're a healthy person, but that's a
Right.
really common thing. Covert narcissists can be very chameleon-like. So when they meet you, they kind of size you up and
Mhm.
they can tell like, oh, she likes this or he likes this. Well, let me ask them about this and let me, come in from this angle. So when you're talking to them, you're like, oh my gosh, this person understands me. And they can really use things against you that they can speak your language.
Mhm.
If you're a spiritual person, they can use spiritual lingo to get to your heart. And you're like, oh my gosh, they're on the same page. If they are, if you're into psychology, they can use like big psychological terms and talk about how they take responsibility for themselves and how they work on themselves and all this stuff. And you're like, oh, this is fantastic. But
Mhm.
then we'll use that later against you to manipulate and gaslight you, and they will always be in the authority position. They'll put themselves there. So they're teaching you, so that can get really confusing in the spiritual world,
Mhm.
because people who I think are spiritually inclined tend to be very open, and targets of covert narcissists are very open and very nurturing and very self-actualizing. So we're the people in the world that really want to improve ourselves and work on ourselves. And so if
Mhm.
someone confronts us about something, we're open and we don't
Right.
blame other people. And we want to look at that in ourselves. Okay, yeah, I can see where I could have done that. Well, if you're with a covert narcissist, you're the perfect person for them because they will use that to make you feel like everything is your fault. And you'll take it because you've learned to do that and you've learned not to blame others.
Mhm.
And so they'll do it in such a smooth way, you don't notice it. And in a way where they seem really impressive. And so you don't notice it and you end up taking on all these issues that are actually theirs that have nothing to do with you.
Mhm.
So it's like psychological. It is psychological manipulation and control. And the sad thing is the people that usually get involved with these are the healers of the world.
Mhm.
We all what we have in common, we tend to be here and wanting to help the world and wanting to love people and wanting to make this world a better place. And we tend to be people too that weren't taught boundaries,
Right.
that, and we can be people pleasers and we're here to serve. And so that sets us up so perfectly. So we don't see them clearly.
Well, and one of the things that you said, Debbie, I think is really important. Like, we're empaths.
Mhm.
We're always learning. We're always growing. We're wanting to make the world a better place,
Mhm.
but it starts with us.
Mhm.
Like, I know one of the things I got from a counselor who has written a lot of books. He always said, you can't take people where you've not been. And so, you're always wanting to learn and grow and then help people from a place of what you've learned and where you've grown. And my observations of a covert narcissist is like they don't want feedback. They can't handle any criticism. They're super insecure. And when they get feedback, even if it's constructive criticism, they're not going to do it. you
Right.
know and
Right.
that's something that I see a lot. And again, so the empath continues to go, okay, well, maybe it's me and maybe I just need to grow more, maybe I need to,
Mhm.
whatever. So I like how you shared that.
Mhm.
Why don't we go through some of these traits, because I think it's really important for people as they're learning about this, educating themselves and getting some additional clarity about the difference in an overt and a covert.
Mhm.
You in your book chapter 4, you really break it down, which I think is really helpful, because I think all of us probably have maybe one characteristic, or but the goal would be, if if a person is exhibiting a lot of these characteristics, you're
Mhm.
more than likely in relationship with a covert narcissist. Is that kind of what your thought is?
Yeah, and on a consistent basis.
Mhm.
You know, that's the key. Like a lot of us will exhibit some of these behaviors, but like here and there, you
Right.
know, yeah, as a reaction to something or yeah, but when it's a lifestyle, that's a
Mhm.
different thing.
Right, right. So you talk about not having a strong sense of self.
Mhm.
Um, what does that look like? Can you maybe share a story or something that would help somebody better understand that?
Yeah, that's a fascinating concept. And it's something to start playing with and something we rarely notice.
Yeah.
So the next time you're with a group of people, well, actually, my son came up with like such a brilliant thing because he's really into story and movies and stuff. And someone was breaking down, he showed me this video. I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a good illustration. So I'll share it. Like,
Mhm.
okay, so you know the Star Wars movies?
Yeah.
So the in my opinion, the originals were the best. And then they really like ruined the rest. That's my opinion. But these guys break it down in this video my son showed me. And here's what they did as a test. If I asked you what Han Solo is like, any characters in there, what's Han Solo like if you don't explain what he does for a job or what he's wearing or what he looks like? How would you describe him?
Mm.
Like we could probably, most of us who've seen it could describe him. He's humorous, he's arrogant, he's, you know, this and that. And even when you think of like maybe like your best friend, if you were to describe them without saying what they do, what they look like, there'd probably be a slew of things you could say. You know, she's sensitive, she's kind, she's creative, she's, you know, blah, 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 a whole bunch of stuff. So now you think of the newer Star Wars. Okay. So now think of, do you remember Princess Amidala?
Mm-mm, I don't.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I'm trying to think, maybe think of any character on there. Like, do you remember Liam Neeson? He
Yeah,
played.
yeah.
Okay. So describe to me, without saying what he does and what he looks like, what was Liam Neeson's character like?
He was, gosh, it's been so long.
Okay. I'll take it to real life because this might
Okay.
be trickier. When you're with a covert narcissist, there's a sense of like, who are you really? There's
Hmm.
like a hollowness, you
Okay.
know? And so you can play with this like next time you're in a group of people, just kind of observe. When I look at Sarah, do I get a sense of who Sarah is? You know, when I look at Jim, is there a
Mhm.
sense of who, okay, that's Jim. He's like this, and this. And then I move on to this other guy, let's say Sean, and I look at him and I'm like, I have no idea who you are.
Mm.
There's a really interesting dynamic that is interesting to start playing with. As you're just observing people, you get a feeling of who a person is. Like I've just met you, but I get a feeling of who you are, you know, and I could probably already say like several things, you know, I've felt or noticed about you. But when you're with a covert narcissist, it's like this strange emptiness,
Mm.
you know, where they're so buried that you have no idea who they are. Um,
Yeah, I love how you just said that. I would say, walking with covert narcissists in the realm of I walk with a lot of betrayed spouses, and a lot of
mhm,
them are in the Christian community. Their husbands are passive, nice guy, whatever.
mhm.
And the word that I get, Debbie, is I can't get a pulse on him.
Right.
There doesn't feel like there's any substance. And they can even
Yeah,
be talking about substance, but there's no substance. So
that's exactly
it
it.
feels like there's this veneer, there's this mask. They walk into the room, size up the room, and they are whoever you need them to be.
That's right.
But
That's right.
I can't get a pulse on him. I hear a lot.
That's a good, yeah, that's exactly it. And when you said the word substance, and you're right, they'll talk in those ways. A friend of mine said, you know, about the person I was with, it always felt like he was scripted,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's just this kind of, they say the right things, that just throw you off and make you more confused. And they'll throw a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo at you called word salad that gets you so jumbled you can't think clearly when they're talking. And you can't figure out why you can't think clearly. Because before the conversation, you were fine and you were clear on what you want to talk about. And now you're like exhausted and your brain just feels jumbled and you can't see clearly. Mm-hmm. That's a red flag too.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So we won't go through all these. Talk about the silent rage. I think that's really good. Sometimes we will refer to like contempt. You can see contempt on their face, but it's kind of behind the teeth and behind the smile and all that. But yeah, talk a little bit about silent rage because it's never going to be over.
Yeah. They're not going to be people that are yelling at you and calling you names. There's going to be nothing you can pinpoint as abuse. Mm-hmm. Right. Even though it is. So silent rage. And if you looked up the DSM-5, which is like the guide for therapists on these are the traits you have to have at least 5 to have narcissistic personality disorder. And one of them is rage, talks about rage, but we get confused because they don't appear rageful. So what it is it's those people that you feel like you have to walk on eggshells around. It's those people that when they're in the house or in the room, you just feel this permeating anger. And you feel like, is this directed at me? Are they angry? And you'll ask them is everything okay? You feel like you're really angry. No, just tired or just, which then works on you not trusting yourself and your own gut intuition and your own senses. So there's a lot of rage inside them and you can feel it. And some of them feel like this dormant volcano who could go off at any minute. There are also people who you feel like you have to watch what you say. And, sometimes if they're a parent or a spouse or partner or whatever, you're thinking, I'm going to wait for the right time to bring this up. These are people you just feel like you have to have kid gloves with.
Yeah. And I think the other word you put in there, you put 2 words, silent rage. I think silence is a big piece of this because there is a lot of silence. And in the silence, there's confusion of, well, did I do something wrong? Are they unhappy? You may not always even feel the rage, but the silence communicates something, correct?
Right. Yeah. Which then goes along with the silent treatment, which is something they do often as a way of punishing you.
Yeah. Classic abuse. So emotional disconnection, I definitely want to talk about that. When you say emotional disconnection, do you feel like they can get in touch with their feelings, or do you feel like they're just completely, from an intimacy standpoint, emotionally, they can't go to vulnerability?
They're so, it's interesting when you're in a relationship with them, you'll be having a conversation and your goal is harmony and connection.
Right.
They don't share that with you. They may appear like they do, but they are so far from who they are, who I believe they truly are, that they don't have this ability to emotionally connect with you like normal people do. You can have, it's again, that feeling. A lot of things with covert narcissists is like a feeling, but you can't really pinpoint it. But it's this feeling of, with some people, it's this natural back and forth. Mm-hmm. And you talk about your feelings and they talk about theirs and you feel heard. And that doesn't happen with a covert narcissist. And the thing that gets really trippy and makes it confusing is there's 3 stages you go through with a covert narcissist. And the first is the love bombing stage. And that word can be misleading sometimes. I was talking to one woman who was like, well, he didn't love bomb me with flowers and dates and all this stuff. He was kind of a little aloof. And I said, yeah, that was the way to love bomb you, because you're someone that gets afraid if someone gives you a poem or flowers, you back off. So he learned that about you. And so he learned to kind of play hard to get with you. And that hooked you, you know? But what happens in the love bombing stage is they become everything you want. And so later on, when you're in a conversation and you feel like you're not connecting, or you can't like emotionally connect with them on the same level, they're saying all the right things, or they're saying things that don't feel good, but seem like they might be right. And you don't know what you're talking about. You, from the time we first learn about them in the love bombing stage, that's the view of them that we have for the rest of the relationship.
You're in love with potential instead of who they really are.
Yeah. Or you just think like, oh, wow, you know, at the beginning we talked so freely and I felt this emotional connection and I felt heard and seen. So you think that's this person.
Right.
And then several years down the road, you're having confusing conversations and you're not able to connect. And so you end up giving them the benefit of the doubt, like so many times. Well, I know he didn't sleep well last night, or I know she's had a rough time at work lately, or, you know, so maybe this is why this isn't going well. I'll wait for a better time. And it's just a series of things like that, a series of day after day, month after month, year after year. You're getting loving things, you're getting kind cards, and maybe they take you on a date, or maybe they say something nice about you. It's called intermittent reinforcement that keeps you in that relationship, where they'll give you these crumbs and then the other stuff, and you get used to that. It's like learned behavior.
Yeah.
And you get used to that. So the point where you're trying to connect with them and it's not working, you end up excusing them because you still see them as the person you first met.
No, that's so good. I think that's really, really helpful. Flying monkeys. I know for me, when I read that was really, really helpful because, and I know we can use a lot of other words, but I think it's really just, you know, mini men or, you know, whatever, cronies. But I think the flying monkeys was really, really articulated well, because again, you're in this fog of confusion. You don't know what's going on. You can't make sense of things. And then, you know, you've got other people around the covert narcissist that are affirming, validating, and all that. So talk a little bit about the flying monkeys. I think that was really, really helpful.
Yeah, the flying monkeys are people in the narcissist's life that are either narcissists themselves or they're also deluded by who this person is. And they've been convinced this is a good person too. And so they're kind of their little armies, like you said, that will also turn against you and can be incredibly cruel and very confusing, you know, and can make you, there's so much self-doubt when it comes to being with a covert narcissist, because they'll throw things in that are kind of true, you know, and then you're like, okay, yeah, I can see where I need to work on that, you know, but there's just so much smoke and mirrors that then when the flying monkey comes at you, then you're like, oh, wow. Okay. So now both of them are saying same thing about me. Maybe I can't see myself clearly. Maybe I really am this, that, and the other that they're saying. Yeah. Like I had, you know, it's like so obvious to me now, but after the divorce, one of his flying monkeys emailed me and said, basically, this divorce is all your fault because you decided you wanted to be happy in life. And so he learned, it was like this twisted psychology. And so he learned he wanted to be happy. And then he realized he didn't want you anymore. And so it's your fault because you decided one day you wanted to be happy. And it's like the weirdest logic. But at the time when I read it, like now I can see it.
Yeah.
At the time, I was like, oh my gosh, was I being selfish? Yes, I did get to a place where I wasn't like pouring myself out for everyone. And I actually realized that this is my life and I actually would like to enjoy it, do
So
things
good.
I enjoy. And so it would work on me, and he was saying the same thing. So it was like, and because I'm such a like, I want to work on myself person and I
Mhm.
don't want to be a selfish person. And so I would just spin and spin over things like that's just a small example
Yeah.
so they'll join them in their, message that all these things are wrong with you. And it really does throw you into a spiral of these people especially someone who's known you a long time. Well, they have known me for a long time. Maybe I just can't see myself clearly.
Did you have some people in your life that were also long-term friends in your life that were like, no, this is not accurate,
Oh,
not,
for
the truth
sure.
tellers?
They were lifelines for me. Yeah. My best friend, Liz, and my sister, I would call them often when I was in the throes of it. And I'm like, am I manipulative? Am I controlling? Am I this? Am I that? Am I just not seeing myself? You guys have known me the longest, anyone, I trust you. And every time they were like, oh my gosh, no, and they would remind me of who I was. But even then I'd go, well, they could just be being nice. And, they haven't lived with me for a while. Maybe I am all this stuff and they don't see it. They just see me here and there. So I mean, now I see very clearly, but at the time it just throws you and you can't see clearly.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good.
Mhm.
I think one of the big ones that you put in here was they sabotage birthdays, holidays, vacations, and meaningful dates, especially when you're even asking for those. Can you show up here, or can you be present here, or like talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a really good one to know when I first, that we don't notice it all because it's done so covertly.
Subtle for sure.
So subtle. And I remember being asked when I was first looking into this, and I found a coach who knew about narcissism. And she said, what have your birthdays been like? And I
Mm,
was like, oh my gosh, that's a thing? Because I haven't figured out why I end up in tears at the end of my birthday. And I have for the last 15 years.
mm,
And I don't know why, because nothing mean was said to me. I got presents. I was taken to a nice restaurant, all the things. But so why? But it would be like a subtle thing, like a statement being said, like, did you like your present? Because you didn't really seem that appreciative because I really went to lengths to get you that present. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then it was just these really subtle messages of, gosh, you're a lot. You expect a lot. I can never live up to, what you want, you're so picky. It's just all these like, oh my gosh, am I? I feel terrible. So they sabotage you or, here's another example where you don't notice it. I talked to a woman whose brother had died, and a year later was the anniversary of his death. And so her boyfriend on that anniversary, knowing this, suddenly became depressed. So this is one way covert narcissists can use their emotional state to control and manipulate. So all of a sudden he's depressed. So she's a giving, caring person. She cares that he's depressed. And so she spends the day taking care of him and making sure he's okay. The day should have been about her. This is a big deal, for her. The next day he's fine. He's not depressed anymore, and even like they will lie about injuries and being sick. And it's basically the whole theme is with a narcissist is to get the attention back on them. The attention needs to always be on them. And so the covert type, because they're with kind, nurturing people, will use that against you because they know if they're hurt, if they're sick, if they're needy in any way, if they're depressed, you will stop everything and take care of them and make sure they're okay.
Yeah.
So they'll use that. Yeah. Vacations you've been excited about, or like, you know, I remember one time I was so excited about this concert. I love the Celtic women.
Me too.
My dream is someday to go to Ireland and see them perform outside in some beautiful place.
Let's go together, because I would totally be up for that.
Okay, good. Let's do it. So I had saved up for this and we went together. It was obviously known by my whole family, my kids, everything. I was so excited. So we get there and suddenly he's moody, you know, and things are irritating him and things aren't right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want this to be great for everyone. Well, here, can I get you this? Can I do that? And then it's just like the rage, it's permeating, where I'm sitting there watching Celtic women and I'm just feeling, you know, this like,
that's you know, the passive aggressive too. Yeah.
It's so passive aggressive. Yeah. And so the whole time I'm just feeling this irritation, annoyance, frustration. And then I start feeling like my own stuff of like, oh gosh, it's all about me, you know, because it could never be all about me, because then I'm selfish or I'm this or I'm that. So that's so birthdays, Mother's Day, Father's Day, you know, Christmas, holidays, vacations, anything that is celebratory, things that bring you joy, you know, are sabotaged by them. Yeah.
What would you say that took place for your kids too? Like meaningful dates that the kids had, or birthdays and things like that? Was there withholding from that?
Yeah. Yeah. With them, I think I want to stay more vague, but it definitely, but it definitely crosses over to kids big time. And you see it as kids age. That's another thing. Like covert narcissists can appear to be great parents when kids are young. Because when you think about it, when kids are young, they're like, mommy, daddy, you know, you're their hero. They're so excited to see you. So for a narcissist, that's their energy
supply. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're like all about that. But then once the kids start growing, you know, like middle school and on, and they start forming their own opinions and they start not really wanting to watch the movie you want to watch, or do what you want to do. And, you know, that's when the covert narcissist parent changes, because it's no longer about them. They're no longer the hero. And and then their behavior can very much change. You know, a lot of them will have like the golden child, you know, the child who does everything right and does everything that, you know, their paradigm of how life should be. If that kid is lining up to that, they're in their good grace. But if they have a kid who is not giving them attention, is not doing life the way they think they should do it, you know, like for instance, they'll give their kid advice. And if the kid doesn't take it, like an older child, then it's all about them and they're angry and they'll cut them off. You know, so it's not like they're caring about the child. Right. It's all about them.
Right.
Very conditional love.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not love. I shouldn't even use that word.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned not being protective. And I hear that a lot with the women that I walk with. It's like, they look strong. They, you know, they look on the outside that they would be a protector and safe and all the things. They look even strong. And yet I literally feel so unsafe, so not cared for, so unprotected. You know, talk a little bit about that. I think that's kind of a theme that I get.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah. You know, and I'll use a man, for instance, and just like male energy is protective, you know, and there are some men in this world who are so protective about their family and their kids, and they work so their kids can have a nice home. They are, feel protective when they start dating, just that beautiful male trait
Yes.
that just does feel so protective and it helps us feel secure and taken care of. That's not there. There's not this feeling of like, I love my family. I would do anything for them. In fact, quite the opposite. They will say demeaning things. Well, and also the protectiveness, of a healthy male figure protecting his wife, even from his kids. Like I have a friend who is a great father, and he came home one day and his wife was frazzled and she was exhausted and their son had been unkind to her. So he feels that male protectiveness of the feminine. And so he goes to his son and he said, even though I'm not here, you need to treat your mother with respect. Always. Your mom loves you. She does this and this for you. So that won't happen with a covert narcissist. Right. They instead will make comments to the kids about their mother in front of them and vice versa. Right. There's plenty of female covert narcissists that will do that too. Just really subtle comments of, oh, looks like you're getting seconds. Must like this meal. Lots of like just little digs like that. And, oh, is mommy still sleeping? Giving the kids impressions of who you are by just little comments here and there. Yeah.
Sarcasm, things like that.
Sarcasm, saying something they think is funny, you get hurt, and they're like, oh, we're just teasing, we're just kidding. I mean, it's so destructive and not love and cruel. So, yeah.
Wow, that's good. Talk a little bit about gaslighting. I think that's like a hot topic today. I mean, we talk about defensiveness and explaining and blame shifting and all that, but I think the word gaslighting is really important. And we could even pick it apart a little bit, because if I share something with you and you don't agree with me, that's your prerogative. That's us in relationship. You have an opinion. I have an opinion. That's not gaslighting. Kind of talk a little bit about what gaslighting is.
So gaslighting, it comes from, I think, like a 1940s movie where this guy was like trying to make this woman insane. It's basically getting you to the point where you're questioning your own reality. And so, for instance, I talked to a woman who her boss at work was a covert narcissist. And she was so affected by, he would make comments a lot about like, did you forget to do this? Or, she'd show up late at a meeting and she's like, why is everyone here? And he's like, oh, didn't you get that email? We're starting at 8. She's like, no. And so years of this made her question if something was wrong with her brain, to the point that she scheduled an appointment with a neurologist to get her brain checked. I mean, that's the level they can take you to.
Yep.
I remember talking to a man who his wife was a covert narcissist, and he was saying he would bring up a story and she would say, no, that didn't happen. And he's like, yeah, it did. I was there. She's like, well, whose memory are you going to believe, mine or yours? We all know who has the better memory. I had a friend recently, I tell this story too. Because this is another thing. Once you realize you've been with a covert narcissist and you learn the traits and you really start to understand, you develop a superpower.
Yeah.
And with that, you start noticing people in your life, traits that you never noticed before.
Right.
And even friends you've had for a really long time. And this happened recently to me. You kind of start weeding out, people in your life. And I talk about this in between period that can feel very lonely because you realize how many covert narcissists you've actually been dealing with your whole life.
Yeah.
and didn't see it. But I had one similar that I had a conversation on the phone, and she said, "Remember this?" And I said, "I don't remember that." And she started like hysterically laughing, like strangely laughing, like on and on and on. And in the past, she'd done that with me before. And I had just kind of like, like uncomfortably laughed with her, or I had just like, then went to like, okay, do I have an issue with my brain, and my memory? And this time I just sat, because I've learned to be so much more present in my body. I just stayed quiet. I thought, I'm just going to see how long this goes on, you know? Yeah, it was interesting. And it went on a long time.
Wow.
And I just saw, the thought occurred to me, as like, there has been a pattern of this gaslighting for years with this friend. And I need to change my interaction with her. So after that, I thought, okay. And there's certain people I've gotten rid of, and others I've decided just to minimize, my interaction with them. So yeah, it was really incredible when you just start noticing, because you're so used to seeing someone a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just the not only the gaslighting, but the demeaning behavior.
Yeah.
It was
The
just
demeaning, I think, is really good. The demeaning and the dismissiveness,
yeah.
some people call it indifference,
Yeah.
which feels like a huge betrayal. What about the stories that they create in their head?
Well, they really are pathological liars.
Mhm.
And that sometimes is a hard one for people to wrap their head around, because they think, well, no, he's never been one to lie to me. And then it's like, you kind of realize after time, like, well, would you know it?
Yeah.
If they lie to you. And I've really seen where they are pathological about it, where they really believe their lies, and they wholeheartedly have this picture of you that they believe, and they will believe probably till the day they die. So yeah, it's this interesting thing, and you can get caught up in it, because they also come across, they can be very accomplished people. A lot of them are, and they can sound and appear so confident and intelligent. And so when they're saying things to you that are lies, and they're not true about you or anything, they can just sound so convincing.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's such a weird, it's just such a weird thing to me. Lying in general is a weird thing to me.
Mhm.
Cruelty is a weird thing to me. Like all this stuff. It's just kind of a shock to the system for
Yeah.
someone who is made, like, I feel this about myself, and I'm sure you do, and a lot of people do. I'm just made for love, to be loved, to show love. Like, that's what I'm all about. And
Right.
people that control and manipulate and are unkind and cruel, I don't think I'll ever understand.
Yeah. No,
Like,
I would totally agree.
yeah, it's like a foreign land.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get this. Yeah.
So, how do you feel about, like, do you ever worry about bumping into, being in relationship with another covert narcissist? Because I know many times, like, especially if you had a parent that might be a covert narcissist,
Yeah.
unless there's some healing around that,
Yeah.
it is inevitable potentially that you marry or in relationship with one, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I talk about dating again in my latest book too, because that is a really big deal. And I went through one after my divorce. It was very strange dating again. And I did get involved with one that turned out to be a covert narcissist. Although I was proud of myself, because this time it took me 2 years to figure it out instead of 24. So
Okay.
that's a big improvement.
That's huge.
And I think, I'm now at the place where I don't have a lot of fear anymore, because I've developed a relationship with myself that is so strong and so in tune with my body. Like, a lot of things, Our body knows before our mind.
Yeah.
Like there's, I think if you remember in the Covert Narcissist book, I talk about a card game where it was, they hooked people up and they could tell like their palms were sweaty before they realized what was happening in this card game.
Mm.
So I don't remember what chapter that is, but our bodies know. Like if you look back on these relationships, there were many times where I was treated a certain way, talked to a certain way, and my stomach was tight.
Yeah.
Or my brain was jumbled, my mind was jumbled. These are all signs. These are all red flags. When you're talking to a normal, healthy person, you don't feel that stuff.
Right. No.
So I've gotten so much stronger with myself and much more observant of so much that I really, and also my relationship with myself as far as love and respect has changed dramatically, to the point where I now know what love feels like. I know what it looks like. And I think those are the things to relearn after we're in these relationships, to trust ourselves, to trust our body,
Yes.
to relearn what love actually looks and feels like and what healthy looks and feels like. So it's definitely been a journey. It is for all of us. And I talk about how it's in many ways nothing to fear.
Right.
Because like everything in life, it's another lesson and it's making us more wise, more smart, and if it happens, you'll catch it faster this time.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say, Debbie, one of the thoughts that I had was you were just talking about dating, a woman that might be putting herself back out there, whether she's been in a relationship with somebody or married with somebody or whatever. I think one of the real litmus tests would be, are they walking out what they're talking? Because a covert, especially a passive aggressive narcissist, they will always win the word game. They will win the long game when it comes to words.
Yeah.
And many times why, we're attracted to them because they say all the things,
Right.
and they seem considerate and all, but they're all words. And so the litmus test would be making sure that their life, how they walk out the actionable things match what is being said.
Yeah.
Agree with that?
That's huge. And that's actually one of the traits, that their actions don't match their words. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you're thinking of venturing out, when you feel ready to date, I would highly recommend reading that chat, really understanding what the traits look like. So they have an artillery when they're going out to what to look for. And that's a huge one. And then also mixed with, I think it's a combination of knowing this information, knowing the traits, what they look like, and trusting yourself and loving yourself like you never have before. But that's a huge one. And it's one that seems obvious, but it's really easy to miss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, I don't know if you've heard of Chuck DeGroat's book, When Narcissism Comes to the Church. He's talking about a lot of ministry leaders and how they're gregarious and ministry minded and spiritual and obviously full of all the words. But he, interesting, we talked about, I mentioned the word overt and covert, and he said, instead of the word covert, he said vulnerability, like FAUX, because sometimes they can have the tears and they can have the, you can share your story and you feel seen and heard and all the things. But then again, how is it actionably walked out? Like, are they, is it that kind of moment? Almost like you said earlier, like you're in this room and you feel connected and seen and all that. But that also can be a red flag, right? You know,
Right.
So I think, maybe that could be a litmus test too. Like, is their walk matching their talk?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or
When they say, yeah, I'm someone that really works on myself, like, do they?
yeah,
You
what does that look like? Always ask for the actionable thing. So what does
Yeah.
that look like? I'm in because a lot of times they talk broad. I'm in counseling, I'm this. Well, how often do you go to counseling? Until you get into the minutia and the details, it may sound really glorious and they're wise and so smart and all the things, but unless you get kind of in the minutia and the details, there may not even be anything there, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really good.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what did kind of your healing path look like? I mean, I knew you had a divorce, you got all this information, you interviewed all these ladies, you got to write this book, but like, still there's a lot in the psyche that they leave you with, right?
Oh, completely. Yeah. I went through, so after the divorce, I had still, life stuff to do, kids to take care of.
Yeah.
But I really had to go through a long cocooning period, I call it, where I wasn't ready for the world. You're another thing to, you know, um, not take lightly and to recognize that when you've been through these relationships, it affects your nervous system and your nervous system gets dysregulated. And as a result, life just feels incredibly overwhelming. People feel overwhelming. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone for a long time. I didn't know who I could trust.
Right.
So I stayed home a lot. And I really, it was actually really, I've written 2 other books. One just came out called Worthy of Love. And I actually go into I talk a lot about my own healing journey and what that looked like. And so for me, it was a combination of education, cocooning, being really gentle with myself, honoring when I didn't feel like, no matter how people judged me, just honoring what I needed during that time. And also I learned a lot, which I also talk about how to regulate the nervous system. And I've done a lot of that work on myself. I've had a lot of health issues that are also common after being involved with these, because when it affects our heart and our mind, it affects our whole body. So a lot of people end up with some very serious issues, sometimes, autoimmune diseases or candida or adrenal fatigue or high blood pressure or, because we're not made for this type of thing. We're not designed for abuse.
Yeah.
We're designed for peace and love and everything that feels good. So yeah, it's been a journey of also self-love. And I got to a place where that one year, there's so much to say about it, but I actually wrote it. I also have a little sweet book called The Safest Place Possible, which is the first book I ever wrote before Covert Narcissist. So I don't talk about narcissism. One guy thanked me for it because he then could share it with his kids, he said. But I went through a lot of exercises that I did, like self-love, where I like, for instance, one is anytime I would berate myself about anything, I would follow it up with no judgment, Debbie. Still makes me cry. I should be doing this. I should be saving more money. No judgment, Debbie. I should have lost the weight by now. No judgment, Debbie. I should be better at this. I should be, all the shoulds. And so I've really transformed the way I treat myself. I literally now am at the place where I don't think I ever have any demeaning comment to myself enter my mind anymore. And it's been that way for years. So yeah, I've done a lot of nervous system work, a lot of self-love, self-care, and a lot of increasing my knowledge, and understanding of this and what I've been through. That's been a lot of the key things about my healing. Yeah.
Debbie, do you see some of the, when the nervous system, I mean, we know that our body keeps the score with regard to trauma and things like that. You see that some of the mindfulness work that you did, which you have, if you go to YouTube and you look up Debbie Mirza, she's got some wonderful things on mindfulness. And I love the book that you wrote on A Safe Place. But like, do you see some of that coming back? Like your body beginning to heal itself?
For sure.
Some of
Definitely.
That
Yeah. I was just talking to my son about this the other day, so one thing, when you have like a regulated nervous system, is something stressful happens in your day and you have a reaction to it. Or I'll use the example of you're in traffic, you're on the highway and you see all the brake lights and you slam on your brake and your adrenaline, heightens, your heart beats faster. This is your sympathetic nervous system. Like, right. I mean, our bodies are amazing. And then, you veer off to the right or left or whatever you have to do to get out of harm's way and not hurt anyone else. And then your body starts to come back down and you get home and maybe you get tea and your body slowly comes back down to homeostasis. That's a normal regulated system.
Right.
When it's dysregulated, you have huge reactions to things. You spill water and it just throws you. It can throw your whole day. And so you have these spikes, you have something stressful happen. You have this spike of anxiety. And then, later you'll have this crash and you'll be depressed. And so it's not a regulated system. We're kind of all over the place. We become very reactionary. Life feels overwhelming. I mean, there's so many things to it, but just to give you a picture. So I noticed the other day, something fell off the counter and broke. And I found it fascinating, like a glass broke or something, to notice my body didn't even move. It's like, and now when stressors come into my life, I'll have a bit of freak out. I'll feel my feelings. And then I'm able to come back. So it's that kind of difference. And there's so many things too. I mean, it's a topic that, many books have been written, very thick books, because there's so much to say about it. But yeah, I definitely, it affects your sleep. It affects you emotionally. It affects, your whole immune system is affected by it. So definitely, I still have some health issues I'm dealing with and getting better from. But a lot of things I've seen, I'm much more steady than I used to be. And I'm less, and I notice times where I feel like life's getting too overwhelming. And so I go back to my exercises that I do. And then I can tell a difference of okay, now I feel like I can do life.
So good. That's so good. Well, I want us to come back and do another interview on your book, Worthy of Love, because I think that would be really, really helpful. It's awesome to have a book like this to really educate yourself, because I think kind of, if you're listening right now, and some of this is resonating with you, and you're like, oh, that's what that fog is. That's why I can't think straight. That's why I'm hypervigilant. That's why I'm restless, all the things. I mean, many of those might be that you're in a relationship with somebody who's a covert narcissist. Sometimes you might feel like the life is being sucked out of you slowly over time, or you might be over functioning. So you're in a place of fatigue because you're with somebody under functioning. That's the passive aggressiveness. But I really do want to bring you back, and let's talk about Worthy of Love, and maybe even talk about music. So
yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, love to talk about that.
And I should say, if people go on Amazon and look for the book, they might be a little confused because the cover just got redesigned.
I just saw that. Yes.
Did you see that? Yeah.
Yep.
it looks similar. So it'll be like, okay, wait, this looks like it, but different. But because there's so much to cover on covert narcissism, I've decided to actually write a book series on different topics about it. So that's why I changed the cover. So now the Covert Narcissist book is book 1 of the narcissism series. And then Worthy of Love is book 2. And then this year I'll be working on book 3.
Well, and I will put all in the show notes. I will make sure that I have the link to Amazon that will show the new picture. So, and all the ways to get in touch with you and all that. So I do want to just talk. I mean, I want you to be able to tell everybody how to get in touch with you. But I love how if you don't have her book and you order her book, go to page 182, where it talks about the traits of love. I mean, we can talk about all these destructive behaviors, but I think also great. Let's move to the antithesis of that and say, what are traits of real love? As I'm wanting to either find somebody, or as I'm, desiring to see these in a person, the traits of real love. I love how you put this on 182. They treat you with respect. That doesn't mean, like I said earlier, that Debbie and I have a difference of opinions, but respect is, I'm not shaming her, blaming her, judging her, putting her down, dismissing what she has to say. So they treat you with respect. They stand up for you. They believe in you. They listen to you. They really want to know you. They respect your feelings. They want you to be happy. Sex, they cherish you, love your body, and love to give you pleasure. They love to treat you and celebrate you. They value you. They enjoy you. They treat you with kindness. They support you in your endeavors. They feel excited for you when you succeed. They feel empathy for you when you feel sad, scared, unsure. Their honesty comes from a place of love. They want the best for you. They defend you to others. They care about you. They trust and respect your instincts. They encourage you. And they truly love you, not just with their words, but also with their actions. And I love how you put that in there. I just think it's so good to, to show the things that help us identify what could be destructive to us, but then also like what to look forward to and to look out for in our relationship, the real healthy piece. And that doesn't mean that we're all not going to handle things in unhealthy manners at some time. But I think the beauty is, you know what, I just totally talked disrespectful to you, Debbie, and I want to come apologize. I was thinking, I had to sing this past weekend, and my sister called me Saturday night when I was kind of in that mode of preparing, and I was distracted, and I just remember feeling guilty on the way to church Sunday. I'm like, I really need to call her and just say, like, I'm really sorry that I was not present here or whatever, because that communicates a message, right? You're not important, and all the things. And I think just, it's not that we mess up, it's that we steward some of the behaviors that we have when we're hurtful to somebody or whatever. And a covert narcissist is unable to do that, and so I think it's just important to maybe close with that. But is there anything, before you tell us all the ways of getting in touch with you, is there anything that you want to close with, Debbie?
Yeah, I love that you closed with that, because it's like, okay, this is how covert narcissist behavior looks. This is how it should be. This is what we are aiming for in ourselves and with other people. And yeah, I love that you did that. Yeah. And the best way really is my website. It's just debbiemirza.com. And that really has all the resources I have and everything on there that kind of explains it all, to make it simple.
Yeah, and not only go to her website, but I've perused her website too. There's some fantastic courses on there, and they're not hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So like if you are, if you are a parent, if you are in a relationship with a covert narcissist, these, there's something about walking a path where somebody's ahead of you that can impart knowledge and tools and coping skills and all the things. And so really take advantage of her courses online and all the things. And you can also go to YouTube. She's got a YouTube channel. So I'll make sure all those links get in the show notes.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to close this out real quick with just This episode has been brought to you by Life Beyond Betrayal. It's a monthly membership subscription for women walking through betrayal, abuse, and trauma that provide a safe community, multiple courses, and really helping you reclaim who God created you to be with a weekly support group. So check out lifebeyondbetrayal.com as well. And like I said, Debbie, I will make sure all of the show notes are in there, pointing you to your book on Amazon and all the places that people can find you. So
thank you.